What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Wolves. Here's a quick synopsis. Two fixers are forced to come together to hide a politician's scandalous night. The film stars Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Austin Abrams, and Amy Ryan. Standout performances. Let's just get straight to the reason why I watched this movie. Because it stars two people who have been two of the biggest stars of my lifetime, Brad Pitt and George Clooney, who have a great history of making movies together. Of course, the Free Ocean movies, where Clooney plays Danny Ocean and Pitt plays his close confidant, Rusty Ryan. Those films are just the perfect showcase for their unbelievable chemistry. Ocean's 11 is one of my all-time favorite films, and Ocean's 12 is very good as well. The duo also starred in The Coen Brothers' Burn After Reading, where both are playing dimwits. It's one of Pitt's best roles. Wolves is the fifth film they have co-starred in, and it got me thinking of other male star pairings, and the obvious one is Paul Newman and Robert Redford, who were great, but it was only in two movies, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting, both iconic classics. Another is Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. You have Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Casino, and The Irishman, and a more modern example, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, Good Will Hunting, Dogma, The Last Duel in Air. All these actors' history with each other helps make their films together feel big and important. In Wolves, Clooney and Pitt play nameless fixers. I liked their performances, but I understand some of the frustration regarding their work in this movie. They are both basically doing the same thing. The whole thing with the movie is they are supposed to be similar, but it would have helped the movie if one of them gave a more comedic turn, particularly Pitt. I would have preferred to see him play his character in a similar way to how he played the leading role in Bullet Train. That being said, I disagree with the notion that these two were mailing it in or resting on their laurels. I want to focus on where these two Oscar-winning actors are at this point in their film careers. In the last 5 years, George Clooney has only starred in 3 movies: 2020's The Midnight Sky, which he directed, 2022's Ticket to Paradise, and now Wolves. And Clooney in that time period also directed 2021's The Tender Bar and 2023's The Boy in the Boat, 2 movies I like but don't love. And I would categorize both of those movies as being movies that dads like. While Brad Pitt has starred in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, winning an Oscar, and Ad Astra, both in 2019, The Lost City, Bullet Train, and Babylon, all in 2022, and that gets us to Wolf. Pitt has been way more in the culture of movies recently. Pitt is still interested in being a movie star. When it comes to Clooney, I'm just not sure. I do like the fact that he's re-teaming with past collaborators Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt. What Pitt is doing is he's still seeking working with great filmmakers. Quentin Tarantino, Damien Chazelle, like those are top of the tier directors, while George Clooney is off doing his own thing. These two giant movie stars clearly admire the careers one another has had. Here's what Clooney said to Zach Baron of GQ during an interview with him and Pitt, quote, "I'm really happy to be in a world where you've got an Oscar for the work you do as an actor, because there's a really easy route when you're Brad to do really big commercial films, make a bleep load of money, and live an easy life." And his choices as an actor were always like Seven. Seven's not a home run. When you see Seven, you read the script, you go, that's a commercial film? I don't think so. And he made it a commercial film because he stuck to his guns, end quote. I don't think there's ever been a truer statement about the career of Brad Pitt than that one. George Clooney will next star in a yet-to-be-titled Noah Baumbach movie with Adam Sandler. It's worth noting that Pitt himself was once linked to the film. That's something that I'm really excited for. Noah Baumbach is one of my all-time favorite writer-directors. To see George Clooney in a Noah Baumbach film, that just sounds like a great idea. And then on top of that, to add Adam Sandler, who was great when he worked with Noah Baumbach on the Meyerowitz stories. Brad Pitt will next be an F1 from Top Gun Maverick director Joseph Kosinski. I am somebody who believes that Kosinski is one of the biggest reasons for Top Gun Maverick's massive success. Like, the way he made that movie was brilliant, and I could not be more hyped that after working with Tom Cruise, he's now working with Brad Pitt. But this is what I'm talking about. Like, him making an F1 movie is a clear clear indication that Brad Pitt still wants to be Brad Pitt, that he still is seeking being one of the biggest movie stars on planet Earth, and I admire him for that. He wants to make movies like Babylon, where he's really challenging himself, and then he wants to go off and make an F1 movie. I think that's the cool thing about Brad Pitt, is that he's in between both of those worlds of being a great actor and being a great movie star. And George Clooney has been there before, and I hope he gets back to that, and I think being in a Noah Baumbach movie might get him there. Pitt is also attached to a science fiction film called Land of Opportunity from writer-director Jeff Nichols. Pitt is not only at the point of his career where he's working with past directors like Quentin Tarantino, he's also working with newer filmmakers who are making great films like The Bike Riders. Now, recently there has been some chatter about a new Ocean's film starring the two, Brad Pitt and George Clooney, and yes, I would like to see that happen, but I have my doubts that it can happen without Steven Soderbergh directing it. I think Soderbergh was the clear architect of that trilogy of films. Yes, the main reason I watched this film is because of Pitt and Clooney, but another element that intrigued my interest was the casting of Austin Abrams, a young actor who has really impressed me the last few years. He was a supporting character in Euphoria, Ethan, that I didn't care for, and then all of a sudden, he was given a great dance sequence to Holding Out for a Hero. It's brilliant, and on film, he's great in Mike White's Brad Status with Ben Stiller and Jennifer Caitlin Robinson's Do Revenge. Abrams in Wolf is a young, naive character who is given a great monologue and completely crushes it and goes toe-to-toe with two massive movie stars. Here's what Abrams told IndieWire about starring in the movie. Quote, "A big part of it was convincing myself it was possible to be able to do this and work with two of those guys. You see those names and you don't think it's going to be possible at all. It took a lot of hammering into my mind it was possible." End quote. I'm not saying Austin Abrams is ever going to be a massive movie star, although I do believe he has the potential. I believe this is how you create movie stars. You put them in movies with already established stars. I mean, look at the career of Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner became a massive movie star after being in movies with both Gene Hackman and Sean Connery, two already massive big names. After being in those movies, we all looked at Kevin Costner as a big movie star. Because it's so simple, our minds goes, if this kid can act with these two, he can act with anyone. I want to see him be the star of his own movie. That's how it works. That's how you can produce newer movie stars. And it doesn't happen as much as it should anymore, but I love the fact that Austin Abrams was given this opportunity to be in this movie with Brad Pitt and George Clooney. Abrams will next be in the film Weapons with Josh Brolin, Julie Garner, Alden Ehrenreich, and Benedict Wong. It's Zach Cregger's follow-up to Barbarian. The writer-director of Wolves is Jon Watts, the man who has directed all three of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, and here's what I take from this movie, Wolves, about him. He's a better director than he is a writer. The plot is not the strongest. I think maybe the critics and pundits are being too harsh on the Marvel directors trying to make non-Marvel movies. Like they all acted like the Russo brothers with The Gray Man made one of the worst action movies of all time, and that is simply not true. I liked The Gray Man. I thought it was a perfectly adequate Ryan Gosling-led action movie. And I am seeing some of that same vitriol towards Wolves. Like, I don't understand getting so heated about this movie. It's a fine movie. It's not an all-time great movie. It's not even a great movie. Wolves is a very good movie with very good performances from Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Austin Abrams. I mean, if you think that this movie is getting people to have strong responses about the name Jon Watts, just wait until his next project. He is doing a Star Wars series, The Skeleton Crew, with Jude Law, and that's going to have a lot of really good directors. I know the Daniels are directing an episode of that show. And so is David Lowery and Lee Isaac Chung. I mean, those are great directors directing episodes of a Star Wars show. I mean, that show could really hit. I just think as a culture and as a society, we are way too harsh towards these mainstream directors. It is very hard to make a movie that pleases everyone. And Wolves was obviously trying to be a crowd-pleasing movie. It's not going for a masterpiece. It's not a movie that's trying to get George Clooney or Brad Pitt their second Oscar wins. When I look at the success or a failure of a movie, I kind of look at it like, did the movie do what it was trying to do? And I think in the case of Wolves, the movie is exactly what it wants to be. It's not acting like it's deeper than it is. It's not trying to be self-serious. Getting back to the Russo brothers for a minute, when they make a movie like Cherry, I'm fine with you saying that that movie doesn't work, because that movie doesn't work. It's not as good as that movie thinks it is. Like, it clearly isn't. But when you talk about The Gray Man, I think the Russos made that movie the way they wanted to make that movie, and I think The Gray Man achieves what that movie is going for. A really fun action movie starring Ryan Gosling. People now have very strong reactions to whatever the Russo brothers work on, and my fear is that the exact same thing is about to happen with Jon Watts. Because he made those Spider-Man movies, everyone's going to talk about his future projects and whether or not he's a good director. I personally think Jon Watts is a very good filmmaker. There's been a reaction to this movie Wolves that has really bothered me, and that I'm baffled by, is people saying that this movie is not as good as Clooney and Pitt's past work. I did not walk into this movie thinking I was watching the next Michael Clayton or Moneyball, and the one everyone is comparing this film to is Ocean's 11, and I get it. That movie is what I think of when I think of these two stars together. But if you think logically, did you ever think you were going to get that out of this movie? I just think that ideology is insane. The truth is, I hadn't seen Clooney in a movie as good as this in a while. The idea that he would come out of semi-acting retirement and make the next Michael Clayton movie is insane. Now, that's what I'm hoping for with the Noah Baumbach movie, but I don't know that to be true either. My expectations for this were super low, and I guess everyone's else's was super high. I was just glad that two of my favorite actors were coming back together. I'm not saying I don't understand it. You hear that George Clooney and Brad Pitt are coming together to make a movie with a guy who's coming off of the biggest Spider-Man movie ever, and you have high expectations. And I kind of did as well, but I didn't think I was getting Michael Clayton or Moneyball. Like, I'm just not surprised by this movie. It's a fun movie. I didn't think it was going to be a masterpiece. And both of their filmographies are filled with movies like these that are just okay. Like Brad Pitt with The Mexican. I wouldn't put The Mexican on the list of the great Brad Pitt movies, but I watched that movie and it has Brad Pitt, it has Julia Roberts, and it's just a fun time. That's what I think of when I think about Wolves. It is just a fun time movie. Much of the talk surrounding this movie has absolutely nothing to do with the movie itself. It's all about the fact that the movie was originally going to get a big wide release in movie theaters, and instead it went straight to Apple TV Plus. And this has to do with the box office failure of Fly Me to the Moon, a movie that stars Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum, two big box office draws, and no one saw that movie in theaters. I don't know, and nobody will ever know, how a Brad Pitt, George Clooney movie would have done in movie theaters right now. I just don't think that Wolves would have fared that much better. Like, this movie was not going to make $100 million in a movie theater, or Apple would have put it in movie theaters. Like, these people have done the research. Not that many people care about this movie. To seek it out, will a ton of people watch it at home? Absolutely. The names Brad Pitt and George Clooney still mean something. I feel like I have to say this once a week on the podcast. We have to stop looking at how movies used to be, because they used to be a lot simpler. Brad Pitt was in a movie. Wow, I'm going to go to the movie theaters with a bunch of people and watch a Brad Pitt movie. That is no longer the reality. We can no longer agree on what the big movie of the moment is unless it's a big studio movie that we've all heard of. There are so many people in my life who have never even heard of the movie Wolves. where in 2001, Ocean's 11 made $450 million, mostly due to the fact that it had three of the biggest movie stars of our time in that film: Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Julia Roberts. Matt Damon also probably added to that as well. Star power mattered way more back then than it does now. Now, it doesn't mean that star power doesn't matter anymore. People will still watch this movie because it has George Clooney and Brad Pitt. But basically, every big star has now been in a streaming-only movie. Tom Hanks has been in one. Denzel Washington was in one. This is the reality. Not every movie with these guys is going to be treated like a massive event. The thing that I find odd about this situation is that Apple has already announced a sequel to Wolves. Like, this is their big makeup to Brad Pitt and George Clooney. Oh, we won't put you in movie theaters, but we'll greenlight a sequel right away so that you guys can get paid for it. I like this movie, don't know that I need a sequel, and don't know how many people are going to care for a sequel. If Austin Abrams is in the sequel, sign me up. I would watch that. I will watch any movie with Brad Pitt or George Clooney in it. I just don't know how many people that's the case for anymore. I think I'm different than most people, that I walked into this movie with expectations that weren't overly huge. I went into this movie hoping that Brad Pitt and George Clooney would remind me that they have great chemistry, and that Austin Abrams would show me why I view him as one of the best young actors working today. And both of those things happened, so this movie reached my expectations. I just don't know what to say to people who thought that they were walking into the next Michael Clayton or the next Moneyball. Like, I never thought that that was going to be the case, and to think that that was going to be the case is kind of ridiculous to me. Wolves, to me, is exactly as advertised, a fun caper starring two of the biggest movie stars of all time. Now, this would be a completely different tune if they had come together to make a sequel to Ocean's 11 and that movie was a failure. Then I would say come at it, ridicule the movie, because if they make an Ocean's 14 that is bad, I would lose my mind about that. But that's not what Wolves is, and it should not be compared to Ocean's 11. It should not be compared to Michael Clayton. It should not be compared to the other great films of Brad Pitt's career. I just think that's the wrong way to look at a movie like Wolves. What I hope this movie does is I hope it elevates the career of Austin Abrams. Like, I want this young actor to be given more opportunities to be in movies like Wolves with bigger and bigger stars. I want to see him be the lead of his own movie. I think he is one of the better young actors. He's not as popular as Timothée Chalamet or Jeremy Allen White. Those are the young actors of the moment, but I think he has the potential to be there. I think he is a really good actor. And that is one thing I really do like about the recent work of George Clooney, is that he has really championed some young actors recently. I mean, he worked with Christopher Abbott on Catch-22, an actor who I think doesn't get enough credit for how good he is, and now he's here working with Austin Abrams and singing his praises. That, to me, is what is so fascinating about where these two are at in their careers. George Clooney is willing to pass on the mantle of the big movie star to the next generation of stars, and Brad Pitt is like, wait, hold on a minute, I still want to lead a big, massive movie like F1. I still want to be regarded as a massive, massive movie star, and I don't know which one is correct. I guess I'll just come out and say it. I'm more on Team Brad Pitt. I mean, he's one of my favorite actors of all time, and I think he wants to end his career with a real bang. Like, I think he wants to go out on top by making these kind of movies. I don't know if we're really towards the end of Brad Pitt's career. I mean, he says that, and then he stars in 5 more movies. But I like the way that his career is going right now. For George Clooney, I want to see him do other things. I'm happy he's doing a movie with Noah Baumbach. I also want to see him once again work with Steven Soderbergh. That's the reunion we all need to see. Also, can I get Clooney in another film directed by a Coen brother? Maybe Joel Coen's next movie or Ethan Coen's next movie, or when the two finally do reunite, can I get George Clooney in there? Because Clooney has never been funnier than working with the Coen brothers. Just watch Hail Caesar, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, or Burn After Reading. My reaction after the ending of Wolves is I do want to see these two star together in more movies. I mean, they have dynamic chemistry. You want to see movies with George Clooney and Brad Pitt in them. If I had to predict predict, I do believe that an Ocean sequel is inevitable. Like, I think we're just going to get to that point where it's probably going to be directed by somebody other than Steven Soderbergh, which I would be worried for. But again, I do want to see George Clooney play Danny Ocean again because it's his most memorable character. That's his best film performance, in my opinion. Let's get the gang back together, and hey, maybe Austin Abrams would be the perfect addition to an Ocean's film. I would love to see that. That's the kind of Ocean's movie I want to see. The older actors returning and then bring in a new younger cast to join in the group as well. In the meantime, though, if you want more Brad Pitt and George Clooney, watch the film Wolves. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out the movie Wolves. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about The Wild Robot from writer-director Chris Sanders, starring Lupita Nyong'o and Pedro Pascal. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.